What do you want to start with tonight? Which agenda topic are you feeling, Chris?
We can't just jump in. We have announcements to make.
Oh, I missed the announcement memo.
Couple announcements here real quick, and then we're gonna get started for everyone for Refine Labs. First off, we are hiring here. We are hiring for directors of demand gen, performance marketers, and creatives. Creatives could be designers, copywriters, animators, all those different things as well. One of our customers is hiring a director of demand gen. And so if you would prefer to work in-house, we might have the role for you as well. And that's a special shout out to anyone that is here that would get the VIP pass if they are interested, but also for people listening to the podcast afterwards. Feel free to shoot me a DM on LinkedIn if you are interested in learning more about that. Now let's get into it, now that all those announcements are taken care of. So where we're going to start tonight, and I was thinking through how this was going to flow, and I was going to start with the first agenda point, but it actually makes sense to start with the second one and then move it into the first agenda. So that's what we're going to do. And so we're going to get this started with the topic that I was writing several pages about over this weekend for whatever reason, which is rethinking attribution using common sense. Add these 3 measurement methods to your stack to know what's really going on. And so for a little context here, we work with 30 plus B2B SaaS companies right now executing demand gen with a lot of the tactics that are being executed that are not performance marketing or direct attribution happening in the dark funnel in appropriate ways that therefore you wouldn't be able to measure directly. We have built some custom measures that we've talked about in great detail on this podcast, such as custom conversions inside of Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, correlating certain other variables like views or impressions through LinkedIn organic, qualitative insights on comments or messages. There's a lot of other ways that you could think about measuring, but I stopped and thought about this and I was like, maybe if you just kind of like forgot about what was happening right now and started over, you might end up at a different place. And so I'm going to take you through what I'm thinking about this, with the main point of the idea that most of the most important touch points that marketers could do today are not being captured by attribution software, therefore not giving credit, therefore not getting budget, therefore not being executed. And so we need to figure out a way, because the stuff is working, we need to figure out a way to change our processes in order to measure it appropriately, to therefore present to executives about what's actually happening. And so I'm going to go through that. So first one that most companies use, so I'm just going to move through it right now. Some form of attribution, most likely multi-touch attribution software. These tools have become industry standard for B2B SaaS. I believe that you should use them. I think that actually it would be irresponsible to not use them in a lot of instances. And so I think that you should use them. However, we need to acknowledge all of the things that these tools cannot track accurately, automatically. And so being able to divide off, okay, this is what can be measured, and this is what we're not going to be able to measure. We need to figure out other methods to measure these specific things that aren't getting caught by multi-touch attribution software. And so when you start going deeper than that, a couple of the things that we've implemented at Refine Labs, I've watched other companies that either we work with or I'm just friendly with that have been doing some of these things, which have brought in an incredible amount of insights to them that then guide their strategy about what to do. And so the first one about what you could add to the stack, because most companies already are using attribution software. So what could you add? Number one is what I would call self-reported attribution. And so that is inside of your high intent conversion form, AKA probably a demo, but on ours, it's a request a consultation. One of the fields in that is, how did you hear about us? And it is a free text box. We're testing free text as well as a drop-down menu to understand which one would be preferable. We're starting with free text and getting really interesting insights through that. Now, common conversion rate optimization principles would tell you don't add any more fields to the form. It's going to decrease conversion rates, which is true in the mindset of high volume performance marketing or organic to a low intent form. However, I would argue that if you've gotten someone to that high intent page and they're qualified and you're not creating like a massive form, that you wouldn't adjust conversion rates that significantly. We're also going to test that so people know. But when we did it, we didn't add another field. We took out a field and put this one in instead. And so something to consider there. We implemented that on Sunday of this, so 2 or 3 days ago. Since then, we've gotten 3 high intent conversions. I have the data here, and we're going to go through it. So company 1, senior manager, demand generation company, 250 to 1,000 employees. HubSpot's attribution tags it organic search. Multi-touch attribution tags it organic search. How did you hear about us? Self-reported attribution tags it the State of Demand Gen podcast. Number 2, CEO, company of 11 to 50 employees. HubSpot says direct traffic. Multi-touch attribution says actually they had a different person from that account anonymously on organic search previous to that conversion. So we have direct traffic and organic search for this conversion. And how did you hear about us says a word of mouth recommendation from a friend. And the third one, VP revenue marketing, 250 to 1,000 employees. HubSpot says organic search. Multi-touch attribution says organic search. How did you hear about us says LinkedIn and podcast. So 3 out of 3, HubSpot was wrong. Multi-touch attribution was wrong. And how did you hear about us was the most accurate, self-reported by the converter. That's just 3. Now, I know other companies have done this and gotten similar results. So I would highly encourage companies to consider testing this to give credit to things that are not getting credit right now. And I'm just want to restate what I said was that multi-touch attribution and HubSpot were wrong. That's actually not true. They just didn't get the full picture. They didn't actually get the right first touch. And so the multi-touch attribution software gave us some insights, but how did you hear about us clearly got a different result that those tools can't measure. So number 2 would be self-reported attribution. It's super easy to implement. The value of it I'm seeing so far is incredibly high. I would recommend trying it for people, especially if you have channels that are running that you know are working and can't prove. If all you're doing is running performance marketing, $1 million a month in Google ads and thinking that you're going to get something different, I don't know. If 75% of your conversions are branded, you might actually get something different. And so some things for people to think about. The second one that I know people have implemented and gotten really good results is something that I would call offline attribution. Win analysis is probably a more obvious description of this. And so building a program as from either marketing or customer experience, a lot of companies, marketing owns experience in a lot of ways. And so marketing or customer experience to have a direct phone conversation with the primary contact on every opportunity that came through marketing sourced, and having a conversation with them about where they heard about you, where they did their research. When you're on that call, like what you're trying to get initially is how did they hear about you, so you can see how that matches up. But then you can also talk about so many other things that marketers never, and never is an overstatement, but rarely get enough time to speak with customers and prospects. And so this is an opportunity. I've done this before when I was an employee. You can think about understanding why you won, how they heard about you, identifying opportunities to collaborate on things like events or content potentially. There's a lot of different things that you could cover in that call as options. And so that's number 2. I think people should consider both of those. And then the third one is sort of a large scale measurement to measure your penetration and awareness inside of your market. And so in this case, it would be large scale surveys to your ICP at firmographic fit accounts through a third party. So it's not coming through your brand, it's coming through a third party in order to understand aided and unaided recall, preferred brand, which brand they actually use, how do they associate certain associate certain logos, or what's the first thing you think when you see this logo. There are a lot of good insights, and I've done this before as well, that you can use and then track over time to understand, do more people in the market as a percentage basis, if this sample size is statistically relevant, do more people in the market understand our brand? Do they associate it with the right term? Are we the top brand of choice? You can go on and on for these things and track them on a, probably somewhere between 3 and 6 month rolling basis as 3 new data points that can help you sort of triangulate and understand attribution overall. And so we'll close it out there. I have a topic to move into, but I'm sure that there are questions in this one. I would love to pause and take some for people.
Yeah, I think John had a good question that I tried to address slightly in the chat, but I'd love for him to ask you directly. John, I'm going to unmute you. Why don't you ask your question live?
When I was thinking about working,
hey, John, having a little trouble hearing you.
I'll go ahead and ask for you, John. We can't quite hear you come through. So John's question was, what if it's multiple sources that influenced their, how they heard about you or why they reached out, and they might just be putting in what he referred to as the tipping point. So even the self-reported answer, there's likely other things that potentially influence their decision up until that point. What do you say to that?
Totally. Like, we're going from what most companies do right now is no touch automated attribution method using software. And I'm suggesting that people use a combination of tech enabled and manual attribution to sort of triangulate what's going on. We're never going to have 100% accurate on any exact journey. In my view, we're not going to be able to catch everything. We're not going to be able to see exactly how it happened or in what sequence, regardless of what attribution vendors tell us that we would be able to see. And so I acknowledge that that is a fair concern. My response back would be that it's another data point that's clearly getting to certain channels that don't get measured right now, and put together with some manual looking of what's happening. I think that most people would get to a better result than they have today.
Yeah, I kind of figured, I think it's probably likely that every outreach, there was multiple touch points that influenced it. But if they're self-reporting a particular reason, it clearly was a trigger or more influential in some way. Sydney made a good point too, that I think is just worth calling out for the people that are listening, is even separate from just your core form. If you even ask, how did you hear about us on the thank you page is another option. Right on. So I thought that was worth sharing for the listeners too.
Yeah. So, I mean, all that I've done here is look at all of the qualitative insights that I've gotten over the past 5 years of doing these things, where people talk about it on sales calls. Our sales team reports that prospects are saying they always see our content on Facebook ads and they like it, and trying to figure out what is the appropriate way to capture those things in a more reliable way than right now. It's sort of like, I heard about this, it's probably not being logged by a sales rep. And so trying to figure out, is there a way that marketing could have a little bit more input or quote unquote control over getting this data directly from the customer? Yeah,
makes sense. Why don't you roll into your next point then? Let's keep it moving.
Yeah, great. Now that we got that out of the way, because it's going to play a big part in this next one. And maybe this is the reason a lot of people are here tonight, but this is how to build your holistic website funnel with 50 to 100x better conversion rates than lead gen. And that's conversion rates to close one, not conversion rates to SQL or whatever other people are measuring. I'm sure the conversion rate to SQL is better too, but this is conversion rates to close one. And when you add up the attrition of lead gen across all the different stages, you get to a really low number, and you actually can relatively easily get to a number that's 50 to 100x better from lead to close one by doing this. And so the good thing as a first step for most people is most people already have this funnel built. They just may not necessarily recognize how much better it is, and they may not be spending a lot of time optimizing it. And so we're going to talk through several different looks at this. So the first part and the way that you could identify this and compare it to other data, and we've talked about this several times on the podcast before, but I feel like it's important to mention here. High intent conversion on your website that moves into an opportunity, that moves into closed won, that's your high intent website funnel that we're going to continue to build on. And so the reason that we work on that is because they have the highest conversion rates, the shortest sales cycles, are best aligned to how buyers want to buy, the most scalability, the lowest customer acquisition cost, the best channel that you could build on as a marketer and a business. And so the first step is looking at that process and optimizing that process for customer experience and overall conversion. And so I had one person on a podcast, and I've been doing this work for a long time. Some people would call it sales ops work. Some people would call it rev ops. Some people would call it sales enablement. I was doing this as a marketing manager like 5 years ago, thinking about how do we need to do a handoff? Who should have the first call? How are we going to optimize what's talked about in that call by providing the rep with the most data? Looking throughout that entire process to find ways that you can make it more efficient and pleasant for your buyer to move through the process, not what makes it easier for you to do, right? Most companies pass that lead to an SDR because it's easier for them. It's cheaper for them. But what's better for your customer is what I'm asking people to think about. And usually what's best for your customer is also going to be best for you. And so that's from the conversion down, that's the funnel and what to optimize. But now we need to work up, right? So what's going on above that as key performance indicators to move through? And so what I'm suggesting for people is that you continue to build up in the funnel pre-conversion. And so if you kept going up, the next step up would be demo page views, and demo conversion rate could be both, or high intent page conversion rate and views would be the next metric. Non-paid traffic, that's a filter for some that'll de-incentivize people to just run a bunch of LinkedIn ads to a demo page or Google ads shoving people into a demo form, because you're going to kill your conversion rates if you do that, both on the page and in your sales funnel. And so non-paid traffic on that page, as an additional layer to that, if you had a tool like Sixth or otherwise, you could do account de-anonymization and start tracking the page views of accounts that firmographically fit your ICP. And so that could be an additional layer that you could do, and you can use that tool with that methodology as we continue to go all the way up. And then from demo page views, I did this exercise over the weekend, and so I started to see what's going on. Is that when you look at Google Analytics, you can start to see where the traffic flows into that page. And so you can look at where are the main sources of traffic on that page. I know the referral sources that drive revenue are organic and direct for the most part. There's some referral, there's some pay-per-click, but organic and direct is a really interesting one. And so you need to figure out where are the pages that people are coming in order to get to the demo page, and then start to build. Maybe there's 2 or 3 separate flows from there. And then we need one top level KPI that I haven't quite defined yet. And so it's going to be something along the lines of organic and direct homepage views or something like that, that will exclude long tail SEO and other things like that. But I'm not exactly, most likely that would be a brand or a high intent search in order to land on that page from those channels. And so those are the ways that I'm working up the funnel from a website standpoint. So now you can go through and work through GA or whatever you're using to start to build that out. So you have key performance indicators at steps that right now are pre-conversion and quote unquote, it's either dark or anonymous if you don't have a conversion or some type of cookies or identification dropped. This is where the manual attribution part that we just talked about, or all the additional attribution components, starts to be really impactful. And so you need to have this set up to recognize we have multi-touch attribution, which is going to give credit to a lot of performance marketing channels. It's also going to give credit to organic or direct traffic. But we need to set this up so we can understand, okay, what are the other channels that are not able to be measured, and how are they impacting this thing? We used to use Facebook custom conversions for Facebook and Instagram ads until iOS 14 kind of like ruined that. And at that point, it was very clear. It was like, okay, we spent this much money on Facebook ads. The company got 150 demos. 73 of them are attributed to our Facebook ads without remarketing. And so it was very clear. Now that's not there. As we continue to see privacy and other things happen, I expect that degrades on LinkedIn and other platforms as well that are not direct response type of conversions. And so you have the manual attribution set up, then you kind of start to see, okay, what are the channels that are impacting this that I don't have direct revenue from? And then how can I start to optimize or go harder into those channels to make that impact work better? This is where we start getting into more of the marketing art than the science, which starts to scare a little bit of people, right? There's some science going on here. We're looking at different points, but then when you need to figure out how can I make this work harder for me, then you need to start thinking about it more like art. There's no exact formula of what to do. We provide tips and other things like that on the show. But a lot of it will come down overall to recognizing and executing it. And so then you would have your core sources. Let's go through it for us. Podcast and LinkedIn is what we've gotten so far with our self-reported attribution, which was much different than what attribution software had, which would be a huge insight for our business about what to do next, even though it wasn't an insight because we already knew that was the case, but other companies may not. That then we need to figure out, okay, how do we make those two channels work better? And how do we start building additional channels on top of it, which will get covered later in this episode. And so we're doing one live event per week. And then we have another series that we're testing at once a month. Now we're moving that to once every 2 weeks. And soon we'll probably have a live event twice per week, for the reason that we're ramping up the volume to get more of that impact, both from events, podcast, and organic content all in one swoop. And so that's one thing that you could do. Thinking about how we could continue to scale up on LinkedIn. That could be getting employees involved. That could be increasing the frequency. It could be increasing the variation of the posts. You notice today I posted a text post. I'm going to start testing if I did video and text in the same day, how that would impact overall visibility in the algorithm. And so I'll let you know when we start to figure that component out. I remember testing that in 2019 and it worked. And so, but a lot of things have changed in the algorithm since then. And so we'll report back, but those are just the process of how you could start to build out that, the sources that feed the holistic website funnel of people that are converting. And the goal of setting these like Google Analytics type KPIs, traffic and website page KPIs, and putting guardrails on it, like non-paid and different things like that, is to help marketers move into the right direction for the things that are actually driving revenue. And we'll pause there and see if people have any questions. We're going to, and just before we get into questions, this is something that we're going to continue to build out. So, right, I did like a lot of different, the post conversion till close one is locked. Like it's super obvious how we measure that. And we've been doing it for a very long time. The GA component, that's 8 hours of me looking through GA across like 8 or 10 companies and pulling data, looking for correlations to understand, okay, this metric always moves up when these metrics, AKA demos or SQOs, always moves up too. And so I'm continuing to dig and look for that consistent positive correlation to point people in the right direction.
I actually have a great question from Blake that's not too dissimilar from the question that was written in, and I think this is a good time to ask it based on where you are. So I'm going to bring Blake on. What's up, Blake? Always love having you on the show.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey, great to see you.
Yeah, good seeing you guys. So as Megan said, this is kind of touching on what you've already talked about, but I know when you guys bring on clients at Refine Labs, they're philosophically aligned with your model and they're like ready to make that change. But as you were kind of alluding to there, going in GA, spending 8 hours and building those correlations, is that how you present it to your clients, like executive teams, like beyond the marketing team? So like, if you're trying to get like buy-in from the entire executive team, do you like present that mix of qualitative data, or excuse me, the quantitative data and qualitative data, and kind of like build it as a narrative for them? Or like, how do you go about making that shift? Because I'm sure that's a transition for them.
Before we start working together, or like 6 months in?
Well, so like, do you, when they start, like, right, maybe I misunderstood. Do you guys have that in place before they even start, you start working together, like the holistic website funnel?
Yes, so we measure on their data. We show them that a majority of their revenue is coming through this way anyway, and we help them understand that it's the most scalable and customer centric. And then we start executing around that.
Okay.
And so the GA metrics, yes, we're looking at those, but they are not standardized with positive correlation across all customers yet, right? Like we're still digging to figure out what those things are. The reason that I'm digging for them is because I'm starting to recognize that companies have been just like, they're so attached to this MQL metric that they need a new metric before demo to know what's going on. And right now they default to like metrics that are not important, like overall website traffic, regardless of quality, total impressions, even though all of them were display ads. You know what I mean? And so just helping customers helping them this is a new demand model. It requires new metrics. These are the metrics above conversion is what we're trying to get to right now to help people, one, to help our customers be more successful, but to help a lot of people that listen to this podcast just go and do it themselves.
And Blake, I'll add a couple points here because I think especially oftentimes we'll speak with someone that's on the marketing team and maybe they're philosophically aligned, but maybe they feel like they need to convince someone else in their organization to get on board. And I've had conversations with people that we're talking about potentially partnering up with. And really, I think it comes down to two things. I think what Chris really described is sort of the new demand model, like split the funnel, like show them with what data we do have, what's not working and what does work. And I think the other approach when you speak to the qualitative side is just like taking a step back and getting them to agree and acknowledge that the way people bought 20 years ago has completely changed. And the way people make buying decisions has changed. Yet a lot of the tactics that we deploy today, have not. And so there is an element of trying to, tell them this story of what's happening that's completely independent of whether or not they're going to hire us, and get them to acknowledge some of the changes and the shifts in reality. And if you can kind of couple that story and then show them some data points that help make sort of a case that's more meaningful to them, that's when we've had the most success of maybe like convincing someone. But a lot of the times, we aim to work with people that we're not necessarily like having to sell hard or convince, but I think that narrative is important and most people will agree with it, even if they're only pulling from their own experience and like buying and evaluating products. So I would just add that to what you said, Chris.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that kind of like, color in there from both of you. And that was awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, Blake.
Cool. Thanks, Blake.
What do you got up next, Chris? Rolling into you're on fire tonight.
Let's roll through. I don't think we've gone through 3 straight agenda items as quickly ever. So let's take a moment to celebrate.
Oh, nice. I thought
Yeah.
you had more on that last topic, but we're good there.
Yeah, we are good there.
Nice.
Keep rolling.
Keep rolling. I'll drum up some questions. Let's
do it. The last topic we had on the agenda, I've been thinking about this a lot, and which is how marketing teams can be prepared to capitalize on new opportunities when they emerge. And so let's start with why this is important. And so the why around this is if you get it right and you recognize the opportunity and you can execute effectively for a sustained period of time, you can have 2, 3, 5, even years of executing in a channel that your customers are not doing or are not doing effectively or well. And that is where you get massive growth if those things match up. New channel, lots of your customers are there. Your competitors move slowly, do not recognize the opportunity or cannot execute on it or are not paying attention, which gives you free reign to crush there, which is what I've done for a majority of my career. SEO in 2013, it was super easy to rank for the companies that I was working for, get on page 1 fast. Facebook and Instagram ads in 2016. a video podcast with physicians in 2018, LinkedIn organic in 2019. Like, what's going to be next? I'm not sure, but when it happens, we'll be able to see it and we'll be able to execute on it. And I'm just trying to drive home the why of this, because it's an impact that is almost impossible to replicate through mature marketing channels or other methods of getting that impact, like direct sales or things like that. And so the thing to recognize here is that when I move down that clip of things, SEO, Facebook, Instagram ads, video, podcast, LinkedIn, what's next, is that these things compound when you think about the skills required in order to execute on them. And so, like, if you can't create a Facebook ad that your customers like, maybe you shouldn't be thinking about a podcast right now. Or if you can't build a website that converts, maybe you shouldn't be thinking about this thing. And so it gives you a roadmap of getting good at certain things that allows you to then see new opportunities. And so we're going to go through the first thing that people need to recognize in order to start moving on this is that it starts with mindset in your company about what you're trying to accomplish, which then drives everything else downstream. And so the reason that I was able to see and execute well on some of these opportunities is because I am thinking like a marketer that optimizes for revenue. I'm not thinking like a salesperson that optimizes for leads, or a marketer that optimizes for leads. And so I see a lot of companies that have a different mindset, which changes certain behaviors, which nobody would run Facebook ads the way that I ran them right now, or ran them in 2016, because their mindset is around getting leads, not driving revenue at high efficiency at low CAC. And so mindset is number one, which then allows you to start looking at new channels, which would then encourage you to find different talent, right? And so if you had the mindset of, we need to get 4,000 MQLs a month, all of your resources and talent that gets built are going to be built around conversion-based, heavy performance marketing, lead gen. You're going to get math people that don't understand customers and don't understand looking at data inside of Salesforce. Overall, your talent is going to start to skew in a certain direction. But if you were looking at it with a different mindset, you might start to build on creative, copywriting, subject matter expertise, things like that. And then once you have the talent in place, then you actually start executing, which allows you to build process, right? And so on the process side, if there was a new social channel that emerged right now that we wanted to execute on, we have top level content that people like, we have post-production processes and capabilities, we understand how to distribute content in certain channels, and we would be able to just drop in and win in another social channel. But other companies that don't have any of these things figured out, they wouldn't have the talent, they wouldn't have the mindset, the talent, or the process, which is why they see an opportunity, right? I think a lot of people would resonate with this. A lot of companies see the opportunity. A lot of people and companies saw that there was an opportunity on LinkedIn. Not that many figured out how to make it really work for them. And then as you continue to build process, I believe that over time you build internal IP that other people don't have, that is difficult to replicate or capture without figuring out how to do it yourself. And then once you have all of those different things lined up, you're looking at things with a new opportunity, with a new lens. And then when an opportunity emerges, you immediately see it. And if you choose to execute on it, you can choose to execute and go right on away. And you have the right mindset to look at the right things with the right expectations of time to do the right things. And so I think that is the sequence of events about how companies could do that. Now, if you are a company right now that just generates 10,000 leads a month through Google ads and LinkedIn ads, and the process of getting to the place that I just said I think would be close to at least a year, probably significantly more than a year. You're going to need to hire new talent. You're going to have to change the executive mindset. You're going to have to change the metrics. You're going to have to figure out process. You're probably going to have attrition of some of your existing employees, and then all those things working out. And I'm positive that if you executed that properly, you would be in a much more advantageous spot long-term, because customers continue to move, and the rate that they move is getting faster, and the speed that companies move is getting slower. And so we have these things going in a different direction. Speed matters as a marketing team immensely. We cannot have places where it takes 3 months to get a campaign approved because it needs to go through 5 approval layers with executives on what words were used in the graphic. We need to figure out how to move more quickly. I mentioned that in my post today. Like, we record this episode and it will go live on the podcast tomorrow midday, less than 24-hour turnaround. And I record podcasts with companies and I don't see the podcast posted for 4 months. And I'm like, what are you doing? By the time it gets published, anything that I said is no longer relevant. And so just things move really quickly. And so I'm encouraging companies to think about speed in this overall process, because of just the massive gains that you can get through continuously building skills and talent inside of your company.
I love this topic, Chris. And while I'm drumming up some questions from the crew here, I want you to speak about something else related to this too, because I think you talk about the importance of like building these competencies over time. And I also think sometimes, especially earlier stage startups, don't have some of their like fundamental go-to-market or marketing components in place. And then they jump to wanting to run, paid media or start a podcast. Like, I also think that there are like core things you need to have figured out in your business that need to be like a clear ICP, like validated messaging, all of these things. And so this is a little back to basics, but almost like the step before what you just described. What do you see as some of the core like elements of their business that they need to have sorted out before they're even layering on all of these marketing strategies?
Yeah. So I think that this advice that I've been giving could be implemented with a company that has, 0 to 10 customers, and over time be successful when looked at it the right way. But this podcast, I would say, is primarily built for companies that already have clear product market fit and are trying to scale. And so we do some of the like small business consulting that offers like a different look that's a little bit more scrappy, so to speak. But I do believe that you could build and get there as you go. But I think some of the core things that I see that miss here is that executives try and scale sales too quickly, get too disconnected from the customer, and don't like drive that optimization of ICP messaging, other things along those lines. And so we continue to refine our ICP today, right? I think every company is going through revisions of their ICP. And if they're not, they should be, because as the market's moving and as your product is evolving and as your content is changing, your ICP is changing, just it's minor. And so that's something to think about, but you should have a clear picture of who your customer is that's actually going to buy your stuff. When you're earlier stage, you're most likely going to see that happen in your retention metrics, not necessarily in your volume metrics. If you have an ICP, it might be too wide. You might bring in some people that are on the fringe. Those people might churn after 3, 6, 12 months. And then you'd be able to look back and refine the ICP based on that. What did we learn? What went wrong? Why did this happen? And it would help you refine it. But you need to have a defined ICP in order to produce any level of content that brings value to these people with specifics. The easy example is, I know a lot of marketers listen to this podcast, but there is tremendous value in us being a B2B SaaS podcast, a B2B enterprise SaaS podcast that sell deals over a certain size with a certain employee count above that, right? And so as you continue to filter down, this content gets more specific, which is why a lot of people listen to the podcast and a lot of people show up for this advice. And so people get scared of going more narrow. And I think there's a lot of value in going more narrow. Through the work on your ICP combined with messaging and positioning, you should get those two. And the way to figure that out would be to have someone test them in sales calls. I still take sales calls today for that reason, right? To understand how, if we're, have an enterprise deal, a company in a new market, a company that sells to a different persona, I'm going to talk to those people to understand what are all the people that sell cybersecurity, or we have customers in cybersecurity. It's just an example. What are all the people in cybersecurity doing in marketing? I'm going to take those two calls so I can ask them, how much money are you spending? What channels are you allocated on? How are you scoring your team? It's all insights. So it's continuous insights. So every marketer needs to have the lens of, I need to be consistently learning about more and more about our customers so I can refine our targeting, our messaging, our positioning, everything like that. And then the last thing that you're going to need is you're not going to need it, but you're going to want to have it, is a repeatable sales process that happens in a pretty defined period of time with relatively consistent close rates and different things like that. So you can move people through, like if we're talking about how to capitalize on these like new opportunities, hopefully your company, you should be mature enough to have your ICP well defined and the other things that I mentioned before you think about running TikTok retargeting ads, or you know what I mean? Other things that are kind of on the fringe.
Yes. I feel like not all startups do that though. That's why I asked the question. But I wholeheartedly agree. Andrew's got a great scenario to talk out. Why don't I bring him on? You ready for some live AMA?
Of course.
All right, let's do it. Andrew, I think this is going to be a fun one. I'm unmuting you. Hey.
There we go. Got it.
Let's do this.
Hey, man. Good to see you.
Hello. Yeah, so was talking to my CEO last week about, there's 4, 5, 6 really influential, prominent clients in our space who we have a great relationship with. And we're running events, we're doing a podcast, we're creating content. It'd be easy to say, let's do a 1 episode with these folks and 40 other folks over time. But my question is, we're thinking about how do we actually enroll them in an ongoing type of relationship, in a ongoing kind of way in the community that we're building. And as the subject matter experts that can speak outside of our expertise, we're service providers with kind of specific expertise, but they've got that subject matter expertise. So like, how might you approach getting those people involved if that was our goal?
Figure out what's important to them and then decide whether or not you can give it to them. Right? Some people might just do it because it makes them feel good, or they want to have a little side gig, or they want to get better at public speaking, or they just want to share their expertise. Some people will say yes no matter what. Right? So there's a pool of people, but perhaps other people, like we've been able to get Dave Gerhardt coming on a monthly basis to do our events. I don't know for sure because he hasn't told me, but my assumption is that he has DGMG and we give him a lot of awareness, which then helps him drive, memberships to his community and content. And so that's a fair trade in my view, right? Dave brings an audience, he brings a great perspective, he fuels the content on a once-a-month basis, and he gets some of those things in exchange. And so it's figuring out, what do you have that can be valuable to people, and then figuring out, is that actually value? Do they value it enough to do those different things? And so there's 2 ways that you can do it. If you're just getting started, you can just have those conversations and say, hey, like, we have this and we'll be able to do this, and in exchange we want that, right? It could be that way. The second option, which is what we took, is that we built it, and now it's for the people that see it, it's obvious the value that it can provide to them, and then we don't even need to have that conversation anymore.
But yeah, what's in it for them? We're all inherently selfish creatures.
Yeah, and it's honestly not hard if you're a business to figure out certain things. We've done this with physicians before, expert physicians, trying to figure out how to get them to speak at a conference about how they use a product, or come on a webinar to talk about a certain use case, or things that had nothing to do with our product in a lot of cases, figuring out how to participate in roundtables, how to be a guest on the podcast, figuring out how to be a like overall reference for our product in more of like a word of mouth sales way. And so there are definitely ways to do that with people. And it's just about understanding them either on a one-to-one basis or a large basis, and then trying to deliver value to them. What do you think? What were you thinking?
I think that's great. And some of the things that we were thinking about is they're generally small business owners. We have an opportunity to create some kind of production value for content for them. And we've got a reach of, a 5-figure email list, et cetera, that a lot of this gets distributed to, that they don't have, so in our view, it would be something that helps them build their brand in the industry. It helps, us. Definitely a win-win is what we're looking for. And more of, I guess maybe a specific question as a follow-up would be, we're building this community, which is kind of the newer piece. And the thought was, do we actually engage them in like a type of role, like saying like, hey, they're part, XYZ community faculty, or giving them, some type of status, which I guess, based on what you just said, it says, okay, we should ask them if that's interesting to them, and if that's going to be helpful to them.
Yeah, you can talk about whether or not that's interesting to them. Another approach to consider is to start with one and demonstrate that you're valuable with whatever that is, without having to have that type of conversation, and then have the conversation afterwards, or maybe you don't even need to have it. I'll give another example for people. Pre-COVID in early 2020, we were doing, I wanted to do influencer events, for lack of a better way to say it. So people that had a lot of credibility and awareness, and do an event with them in order to create awareness for us and content in a podcast. And so I looked at people, and the people that I chose were Josh Braun and Justin Wells. So I noticed that both of them didn't have any high production quality video. I was seeing the impact of video on my business and positioned it to them of, hey, we're going to bring a crew from Hollywood out here and basically, you're going to be the star. I'm just asking you questions, and we're going to talk about this thing, and we're going to get a bunch of people here, and I'm going to do everything. And all you have to do is show up for 2 hours and talk. And so there's a ton of different angles, if they're content creators, then leading toward how you can deliver them like medium or type of content that's valuable, that they might not have right now, that gets them in at a low cost to entry, or testing that is that side. If it's like small business owners, you might have to think about other ways. Cool. Good question.
Yeah, that was a good segment. All right, I have another question, and I hope I pronounce your name correctly, so correct me. Horlbogen. It's probably wrong.
Got it.
One.
No, that's right.
Oh, amazing.
Nice.
Good for me.
Is this your first time here? Good to have you here.
Yes, I'm stalking you on LinkedIn, all your good stuff, but I have kind of a two-part question. Now, you talked about being ready to jump on the next big thing or the next big channel, right? But I've heard you say that you think Clubhouse is a waste of time, and I agree with you. I'm an Android gal #1, so I don't even have the app. And I think my issue is, like, you talk about post-production processes and capabilities. I'm a one-woman show, so the more channels I have that I'm trying to handle, right? It's like, to me, it's like overwhelming. I could just be editing video all day long. Like, how do you? I know you have a team of 3, you said, but in other words, how do you process all of that? What are your tricks? Are there any tips or tricks, or just find out what works and ignore the rest of the stuff?
Yeah, great question. I'll handle the first part first, which is, if you have this particular skill set and mindset and talent, you see a difference between opportunities and shiny objects, I never moved on Clubhouse. It was clear that there was going to be developments there, that the platform was going to hit a place and decline in user growth, and somebody else was going to copy the feature. And so I never even made a profile, right? And so a key part of this is being able to distinguish what a real opportunity is for your business. And as you build that type of learnings and talent through executing on previous channels, like I've talked about in other social channels or SEO or things like that, and with the knowledge that you learn through doing those things and figuring out how to make them work for you in a real way against revenue, then you can better discern whether a future opportunity is right or not. So that's the first part. On the second part, in terms of working through this on your own, I agree that the advice that I gave initially was for a growing and expanding team, where over time you want to continue to build on those things, starting with a couple channels and then moving out. But I'll give you specific advice here, which is to identify 1 to 3 that are the highest value. You might already know what those are. Let's go through it. Do you know what the 1 to 3 are that are the highest value for you right now?
I'm muting you. Go ahead.
You're good.
Not really a marketing person. I know I shouldn't probably even be on this, but
That's all right. You're a marketer. You're here learning.
I am. So I don't know. I do really great on LinkedIn. Well, I did. Their algorithm has really shifted a lot, but it's like I have a podcast, which I record video like you do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I use that. I put that on YouTube. I break it up into little clips for, little bites on Instagram, my Facebook page. Facebook, I do horrible. My ads do great. My organic is horrible.
On Facebook?
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. It's the same for everyone.
Okay.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. And I was hoping to really use it more because I can have groups and I can do live with people, but it's just not happening there. But yeah, I get in other words, how do you have any apps or suggestions for software for cutting through the bulk of what I record to get it into sound bites for other platforms, which is why Clubhouse it's the last thing I wanted is to have to record, where you couldn't record, do the audio, how do you repurpose it, try to get people, it's to me, it's too much. I feel like it is all those shiny things and then you feel like you're missing the boat. So it's just a hard.
Do you work for a company or do you own your own business and you're the only employee?
Second one.
Okay, so that'll help me. I think it'll help the audience and it'll help me answer this question. And so, so what you should do is prove out the channels. I think that what you have here, LinkedIn, video, podcast, and maybe a Facebook group, like those 3 things. And start to get them to work to a level where you want to invest more because you see them working. And then it's not about getting software so that you can do it. It's about either getting an outsourced resource or some type of firm to do the stuff for you that you don't need to do, right? And so picking out the micro clips and editing them that you then post on LinkedIn, editing the clips and putting them somewhere so that you can post them is something that you don't need to be doing. Editing the podcast that can go on Apple is something that you don't need to be doing. Thinking about over time how somebody else could be doing the scheduling and all the other things for the podcast, all of that work, so that all you need to do, so you can focus your energy on the core important parts, which is providing subject matter expertise to people, distributing that in effective ways, and then engaging with them.
Well, I'm not at a point I can hire out yet, but that's the goal. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I don't know, almost 30 months ago where I was in the same boat. So keep working at it.
All right. Thank
Cool.
you. I'm going to read through. I saw some people made some offers in the chat, so I'll go back. Thanks.
Nice. Love that. Thanks for people in the chat. Awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ideas in the chat. My good friend David has a great question. Bringing him on next to keep the AMA going. It's not a demand gen live without you, David. What do you got tonight?
A quick question, picking up on the theme of trying new things and experimenting and kind of going beyond your habitual comfort zone or your habit zone. So let's say we take on a new tactic, a new idea, and we're doing it, and we know we're kind of floundering and learning along the way. How can you, what are some things we might look for to distinguish between it's not working at all and it's working but poorly, and you can improve it?
Mm-hmm.
So not every experiment is going to work out. That's fine. That's part of the game. But it's kind of like, is there a way to be able to tell a difference between, should I keep on investing and trying to make it better? So come back to the question. How can you tell the difference between it's really not working at all, or it could work better, you just need to learn how to calibrate it more?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. So the first number one thing that I think about is I'm going to look at the channel or opportunity, think about it from my customer's perspective, and then understand whether or not it's going to work for me. So easy examples inside of Google, like, are people searching for the things that we sell? Like, that would be my first lever to know, okay, like, there's something here that we should continue to test. And then I'm going to try and drive traffic to my website and try and convert them, and then start working through that process. On LinkedIn, for me at the beginning, I was posting, getting 3 likes, but I saw other people all around that were getting tons of engagement from CMOs and all the people. And so I was like, there's something that's working here. What I'm doing is not working yet. Right. And so kind of like looking around at those different areas to see what's happening. That's easy in like visible social channels. You can see what's going on there in a lot of cases. When I think about layering it on with, like, from my customer's standpoint, I'm mainly looking at like intent and would people buy that way. And so an easy example is I continue to get pitched by all these new, like, either some form of either content syndication or intent data or something put together between those two, where it's like, hey, all these people are looking at this stuff on my website. I'm going to push you the contact information. You can go and do sales to them. And I'm just like, it's not going to work. If somebody wanted to buy the stuff, they would come and talk to us, or we might as well just do, most companies will do cold outbound off that. If you want to do it, be my guest, but I'm looking for way more high efficiency stuff than that. And so number one, like, is it clear that there's something working for somebody else? And then looking through on my own things. So we'll go through the LinkedIn example. I had 1,000 followers, was getting 3 likes. And then I saw other people being successful. And what I finally realized is the 1,000 people that follow me don't care about marketing or don't use LinkedIn. And so what I need to do is figure out how to get new people that see my content, that want to see marketing stuff. So what did I do? I went out and looked at all the people that liked Dave Gerhardt's post. And then I started connecting with the people that looked like they would be relevant, that liked the post, because I know they use the platform and I know they like marketing content. And I did that for a very long time to get stuff going, which then provided people that liked the content. And at that point, when people liked or commented on my content, the amplification from organic was way stronger than it is right now. The post I made this morning, if I posted that 2 years ago, would have gone for 10,000 likes. Today, it went for 1,000. And so, but I got the organic amplification, which then drove new followers. And there was a loop that got started there just by figuring out, the people that see my content right now are not the people that I want to see it. And so it's sort of it's a careful balance, because depending on how you're looking at it and depending on like your experience on this, you could easily pull out of channels that are definitely going to work, and you could easily keep going on channels that are definitely not going to work, right? So it's like, this is sort of like when it comes down to the art and more than the science component of really like looking deeply at the qualitative to figure these things out. Yeah.
I guess for channels and motions that you see other people in your industries or similar types of businesses doing to yours, you could say, well, if they're finding some success in it, perhaps we should be just trying a little harder. But for the brand new thing that nobody's ever tried yet, everyone's in there kind of figuring out if it'll even work at all. So there's nothing lost in either situation, as long as you are aware of what you're doing in the moment.
Totally. And I would encourage the marketing teams that are listening to this to be the team that is testing the new things for themselves that no one else has tested versus being the one that follows their competitors. And the way that you get to going to test the things that aren't tested and get real insights about whether or not they're going to work is by doing a lot of the other things right leading up to that. I don't feel like I've communicated this like 100% clearly yet, and I've been talking about it for quite some time, is that you need to continuously build skills in order to even see and execute on those ones. And I just don't see companies thinking about their resourcing long-term that way.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Tracy, I liked your question. I'm going to bring you on next. Keep this going. You look like you're outside.
You outside? It looks like you're in an apple farm.
I'm unmuting you. All right.
Yeah, I'm outside. I have 3 kids and they're making noise in the house, so I didn't want interruptions. But I'm doing all the online. I work for a company and we just pretty much started being more active online. So I'm trying to juggle organic while putting together paid social strategies. We know our target audience. It's C-suite, but in construction services, so a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to juggle when you said like Facebook organic is a flop for everybody. What do you need to do in the organic channels that you know are kind of going to flop, but just to stay relevant when you are doing paid and to understand the channel and stay active?
So there's a curve in social platforms that is pretty consistent. It happens in most social channels in the same way. The question is, how long does it take, right? So there's a beginning point where early adopters are on it, but the masses aren't there. The next step is that a big movement of people come into it, but they don't post. They just look. That's the spot that you want to be in organic, because you have a lot of eyeballs and not a lot of people posting content. And therefore, when you post content, like I mentioned for my post, it would go for 10,000. It now goes for 1,000. It's because of that effect. And then as the platform matures, more people post content, more people start to tune it out, and more people post ads and buy space, which lowers the availability of eyeballs for your content. And then that continues to grow. The people posting and the ads continue to grow to a rate where there's more content, or the total amount of content that eyeballs, that you don't get exposed to anybody new through organic reach. That's where Facebook is right now. If Instagram's not there, it's really close. Like Twitter is there. And so that's the curve of adoption. I still believe that LinkedIn is sort of in that phase where, but it's coming closer to the end, where not a lot of people are posting and not enough people are buying ads, and there's a ton of people looking at it. And so it's still a good spot in LinkedIn, but you want to be in the curve earlier. And so that's why it's just like, if you're going to invest in a channel like Facebook or Instagram, I would recommend moving to a different channel like LinkedIn or TikTok, where you can get that woof. Because when you post on Facebook, nobody new is going to see it based on the engagement from other people. So you don't get the amplification effect. And so when you think about like potential result per effort, it's just better spent in a different place than those channels, is what I would suggest. Did you have, maybe you have a follow-up, or you have a second part of the question that I can get to?
No, I didn't have a follow-up. That answers it. I kind of felt like Facebook was, almost too ripe. And in my last company, I got on Pinterest when it was up and coming with SEO, and got a lot of traction, but I was just kind of going off of what I was feeling, and you kind of confirmed it. So thank you.
Totally. Just for clarification for people that Facebook groups are available and working. Facebook generally is basically turning into groups. I log into Facebook and the top posts are all posts from the groups that I'm a part of. It's a really interesting effect going on right now. And secondly, the ads still crush. So two ways that you can use that channel. It's just when you think about organic effort, I've been posting on Facebook organically for business purposes since 2013. So I've seen this maturity curve happen in multiple platforms now, and that's the curve that happens. Cool.
All right, I got another question. Keep the AMA going. Jesse, you're up. I'm unmuting you.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, big fan here, Boston, locally. Quick question. Have you ever thought about kind of really growing more on YouTube, given the kind of compounding impact of, it takes a little longer, but I mean, obviously you repurpose your content, but I'm just kind of curious your perspective because of the one-time viewership that happens on LinkedIn, and then you kind of lose it. And we've got the kind of your posts go further and further back. I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
So up until about 3 months ago, YouTube has been, for lack of a better way to say it, an afterthought. We've posted the content there. We documented video content. We did basic SEO, but we didn't think about what is the appropriate length. How exactly should we optimize the title? How can we chop up this Demand Gen Live episode and not just have DGL, but have 7 segments where we answer specific questions that are optimized for search, right? And so we're thinking about it at YouTube more now as we look for another extension channel. A couple other reasons why this is important is like YouTube starting to Google starting to prioritize video results inside of search. So it's like an alternative route to beat some people that spend a lot of time on SEO potentially. And so we're definitely getting more interested in it. I'm kind of like tempering my expectations, so to speak, for a couple of reasons. The one major reason that I see, both in my own behavior and in a lot of people, and when I say this, I think people will recognize it, is that the things that I watch, quote unquote, on YouTube, I actually just listen to it. I don't watch it. And so unless it's instructional or a screenshot UI, I listen to a lot of things, include like, you could use Demand Gen Live, for instance, but I look at a lot of different things and I'm just listening to the audio. I think there's a consumption behavior where people just want to consume passively and not need to watch something. And so unless it's serving a specific intent based on SEO, showing someone a specific answer, I think when you get into more long form, people will prefer to consume audio only. And I think, to be honest, I think it's been a huge miss for YouTube. They make you pay a subscription in order to listen to YouTube without the app open, and people have now stopped watching stuff on YouTube and moved to a podcast because they can get the same content with less friction and be able to do other things on their phone at once. So I think YouTube really fucked that up a little while ago. Yeah, happy to answer a follow-up, but that's my general thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, I just like the fact that it's kind of got the fall forward. You don't have to be as good at the SEO and, you know, all the bots out there that are doing all the SEO stuff. So you can kind of take advantage of it. Not a lot of people love to be on YouTube, but I'm really big fan and continue to do what you're doing.
Cool, man. Good to see you. Thanks.
Thanks, Jesse. John had another question. We had some issues with his audio earlier, so I'll ask for him. He's asking if we get stats on when people listen to stated demand gen, and if so, if we know when. I don't know if we know time of day.
So I think I know what the actual, like, the question you're asking is do we get data about if a specific person watched the podcast, which is definitely no. Podcasts are a locked channel, just like a lot of other dark funnel channels where Spotify and Apple, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Reddit, I could go on for a very long time. These platforms are third-party platforms that have no incentive to give you that data, and there are specific privacy policies in place that forbid them to do that without breaking their own rules. And so we can't get any of that data for the reasons that I just stated. We do get aggregate view metrics by it's on podcasts, it's incredibly limited. How many people started it? How many people listened to it? I think that's all. And were they male or female, and what platform were they listening on? Basically, I think that's all that you get. And so I don't spend a lot of time looking at those components. Feel free to drop it in the chat if I didn't answer the question exactly how you wanted it, which is why I talked through early in this episode, looking at manual attribution, or what I called self-reported attribution, that then starts to show that this is actually driving the outcome that other companies don't see right now. So
yeah, and I think we hear people tell us, right, like, oh, I listen to you while I'm working out, or like in the morning with my coffee. I think qualitatively we hear people tell us those things, which is like when I'm commuting, when I'm exercising, like in the morning, at night. We get a lot of people that'll say that they binge episodes too, which is always fun, but a lot of that is qualitative, not through any platform or data.
Yeah, and the recommendation I gave earlier is just to like, the first thing that you want to see as a marketer somehow is you want to see that qualitative signal, people saying certain things, whether it's to your rep, to you, commenting on certain things. You need to see the qualitative, and then figure out how to convert the qualitative into something that executives will accept. And so moving that into some of the attribution methods that I mentioned, I think would be beneficial for people.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've actually pointed out, because you'll have a lot of listeners that'll actually post on LinkedIn about a particular episode, and will call it out, or even also tag your guest. And so I've actually pointed that out in describing the value of this. Like, you have other people amplifying your content. It's that good. And that's another qualitative / quantitative, if you collect enough to make your case. I mean, I think I might have pulled most of the questions out of this for tonight. What, like, you covered a lot in the agenda tonight, and it was hot. What do you want people to take away from some of the, do you have like a closing thought, a main takeaway to close us out for tonight, Chris? Say no.
The closing thought, I just want to go back to when I went through the three deals that we had, or the high intent submissions that we have so far, and I'm going to continue to track this for people, it was so eye-opening to me, because I've seen this, and now I'm just demonstrating to people what I've known for a very long time. And I'm encouraging a lot of our customers to do it right now, so that they get a clear picture of what's actually going on to make better decisions in marketing. The whole point of attribution is so that you know what levers to pull and what's driving the impact, and you can get that done in a ton of different ways. And so this is one sort of like additional way that you could use to get better insights to then fuel the strategy, or in I think a lot of cases for people, just get executives on board I made this change in 5 minutes on our website, and have data. So like, it's one of the easiest high impact things that you could do. I think it's something that would be good, and would love if somebody goes out and does this. And then if they want to come on the podcast some time and talk about what they found, would love to hear that stuff. Now, if you aren't executing in any of the dark funnel channels, or you're not executing well on them, then you're probably going to get the same, the data is not going to be so different for you. And so you need to have the mix to really get it. But one thing I will say is I do believe that you will get a lot more word of mouth than you expected. And I think that insight alone can be really valuable for people. And so that's the key takeaway. Love seeing you all here. Can't wait to get together again next week. I think we also have an event next week. No, maybe not. Oh no, I'm doing an event on the 8th. I have an event on the 8th with a different company.
But on the podcast though.
What?
We'll put that on the podcast.
Yeah, it'll go on the podcast maybe on Friday, or maybe a little bit thereafter. But if you want to attend live, it's at a friendly time. It's I don't have my calendar up in front of me, but it's either 11 or noon Eastern on July 8th, which is Thursday. If you want to attend, we'll put a link in the show notes, so it'll go live tomorrow for people. But
11 a.m. Eastern on Thursday, confirmed. Check your calendar.
Awesome. Great to see you, everyone.
Have a good week. See you
Have a
next
good week.
Tuesday.
See you soon. Bye.